Good morning. It is August, a new month and a new focus for our Sunday celebrations. We are talking about Wisdom Walk based on the book by the same title by Sage Bennett, who, by the way, is a minister trained in the tradition of Centers for Spiritual Living. And if you've been here for a while, you'll recognize that some of the characters she mentions in the book are people from our Rosa community. And she mentions some programs from our past in this book too. So it's a wonderful read to go and here we are right in this book. And in this book, she tells a story that many of us will recognize as our own story. It's the story of the crisis of faith. You know, the dark night of the soul. Just like the lyrics we heard in the song, when it seems it's too hard to even carry on. And she found herself looking for a way through it all. So she needed a path, a spiritual path that would meet her needs for coping with what was going on in her life at the time. And what she did was she turned to some of the faith traditions of the world to borrow from them bits and pieces that she could put together and form a personal practice which she then called a wisdom walk. Now, she didn't intend to diminish or disrespect other faiths. Rather, she intended to be inspired by them and to give parts of them a home in her heart in the form of something that she would do as her spiritual practice. Now, we started reading this book in January, in the beginning of the year, and at the beginning of the year we learned about how to make a home altar from Hinduism as a way of creating a place, a sacred place to focus and gather our energy, so to speak, when we do our spiritual practice. We also learned from Buddhism the importance of taking time to sit and to be available for the inspiration from within. Now we're carrying on this month with the book, and we're learning from Islam the value of surrendering to prayer. We're going to next week talk about Taoism and how to go with the flow. And then we're going to talk about Christianity and the value and power of forgiving ourselves as well as forgiving others. And then we're going to be talking about the practice of renewal from Judaism. And on August 23rd, our guest speaker is none other than Rabbi George Gittleman, which is so thrilling to have him come. You know, he's one of our favorite teachers here. Not only will he be talking about the tradition of the new year, he'll also later on in the week be offering a workshop on how to go about preparing internally, spiritually, for a renewal no matter what faith you come from. So you can find out more information about the Rabbi's workshop on our website, www.cslsr.org, as well as you can reserve tickets for that event in our Stepping Stones bookstore and on that website too. Then we're going to wrap up the month talking about Native American wisdom and how nature can be a guide for us on our spiritual path. And throughout all of this, the author looks, not only through our own New Thought tradition, but she looks for the thread of similarities that unite and connect faith traditions, which I find so refreshing. I see that as something that is really needed in our world today. I was talking to a friend about it recently, about the level of fear and distrust in our world that exists between people of different faiths, well, between people of different everything right now in the world. And he said something very interesting to me. He said, you know, if we were just to talk with each other, it would be impossible for us to not fall in love. Because when you know somebody's story, he said, you can't help but love them. You know, if you learn about what was their crisis of faith, what was their dark night of the soul, and what helped them navigate their way through it, what was important to them that they kept on going, what are their values, and you're going to fall in love with that person. And I thought about that. Because in today's world, the way we stay separated from each other makes it really difficult for us to fall in love with each other. Especially when the only thing we've got to go on is stereotypes. makes it impossible to know each other's hearts. And I've learned for me to really respect and have understanding of other people, I've got to lean in and really learn and listen, not to the news and not from movies, but from actual people. Or if I can't speak to actual people, by studying what's important to them. And if their faith is important to them, learn about it because it opens windows of understanding. Recently we had a class, the Bhagavad Gita for beginners, and one of the students at the conclusion of the class said, I finally get it now, Edward. I understand why Hinduism is so precious to you. Because before he didn't know anything about the faith tradition, and he started to see its beauty. And wait till you hear Rabbi George Gittleman talk about his faith. You're going to want to convert to Judaism. You will, because of the love that comes out of him when he talks about it. You just want to be in it. And I've always loved that about us at Centers for Spiritual Living, because we've got this idea of ourselves as being a bridge between different faith traditions. Recently, my colleagues and I received a letter from our minister at the Center for Spiritual Living in St. Augustine. And I brought it along with me to read to you. It's from Reverend Ken Wilcox, and he says, Dear friends, since the tragedy in Chattanooga, the mosque here in St. Augustine, Florida, has been experiencing protests with people shouting at the worshipers at the mosque. So on Friday, Center for Spiritual Living St. Augustine, along with other members of the interfaith community, decided to serve as a buffer between the protesters and the worshipers by serving lemonade to both groups. Isn't that something? And because we positioned ourselves between the two groups, they actually had to begin talking to each other. On Saturday, one of the main organizers for the protest announced that she would stop her efforts to disrupt the prayer services. It may be a small step towards peace, but it is a huge leap forward in consciousness. You know, when I read that, I was so thrilled to be a religious scientist, which is what we call ourselves here at the Center for Spiritual Living. And the local newspaper in St. Augustine talked about how understanding among both sides has increased as a result of this willingness to talk to each other, and how beautiful it was when the Muslim imam acknowledged the rights of the demonstrators to be there and express their pain, that it was an appropriate place, and the interfaith community showing up not on one side or the other, but for support of both sides. And the minister, Reverend Ken, is quoted in the article as saying, if we get to a place in America where we can no longer pray in peace, then we are no longer America. And he says, I think our nation is in a lot of fear right now, but we have to step up to greater possibilities of love and compassion. That's another thing I love about Centers for Spiritual Living, because its teaching always calls me to take the highest possible road, and it calls me to abandon hatred and move in the direction of love no matter how hard it is. See, because nowhere in our material does it say, and it will be easy. But it will be necessary. And if we don't do it, who will do it? Now, there is no doubt that atrocities are committed in the name of religion. It's true. Today, in every religion, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindus, everyone have among them those who prefer hatred over love. It's true. And it seems to me that if a person wants war, or racism, or bigotry, or separation, they will find the authority for it in almost any religion. And unfortunately, some of the faith texts, some of the ancient faith texts, have in them the ancient language of war and violence. And on top of that, it is also possible to take anything, whether it's good or bad, violent or peaceful, and make it mean anything you want it to mean to suit your end, to bend even the most beautiful things until it fits a desired outcome. If a person has war in their consciousness, they'll use any religion to get their way. If a person has love in their consciousness, no religion can make them go to war. I was thinking about what Adolf Hitler did with the swastika. You know, that symbol, the swastika, for thousands of years before Adolf Hitler came along and took it and made it a symbol of racial purity in the Nazi Party. It existed before him for thousands of years as a symbol, a holy symbol of good luck and good fortune among Hindus. It's considered to be the symbol literally of well-being, and a sacred symbol at that. You know, when we travel to Bali, the Hindu island in Indonesia, I have to prepare and forewarn the travelers, because it is very common on houses in Bali to decorate the threshold with a swastika as a symbol of holiness is in this place. So you can imagine if you don't know that. It's shocking. I talked to a Hindu about it who explained to me how heartbreaking it is for his people to have one of their sacred symbols scooped up and corrupted and turned into a universally recognized symbol of genocide. You know, in our teaching at the center, it's called Science of Mind, it is common for us to say this phrase: we teach people how to think, not what to think. And when I think about that, what it means to me is that no matter what a holy book says, now whether that's the Bible or the Tao Te Ching or the Quran or the Dhammapada or the Science of Mind textbook, whatever it is, if it's violent, I won't follow it. It means to me that no matter what a faith tradition teaches, mine or somebody else's, if it promotes hatred, mutilation, discrimination, I will not grant it passage into my consciousness with an invitation to stay. I won't. Now, if a book or a teacher or a faith teaches love, compassion, forgiveness, stewardship of the earth, respect, now you got my attention. And I'm more likely to follow it no matter what religion it comes from. See, we like to say we teach people how to think, not what to think. Now, what does how to think mean? It means question everything. Don't accept blindly. Question it. Test what you're learning by experimentation. Check the results and the resonance in your heart. And that's why I love this chapter we're reading together about surrendering to prayer. It's borrowed from an idea in Islam of submitting to prayer more regularly, because we can experiment with it to see what effect does it have if we did something like that. And it's not a too foreign idea from our own Science of Mind teaching. Our own founder, and this is a very famous passage written by him, said, if one would take time, once a day at least, to let go of all that is not true and lay hold of reality, let go of doubt, distrust, worry, condemnation, and fear, and lay hold of life in its expression of beauty, truth, and wholeness, then their mental congestion would be healed. Keep the mind and body open to the reception of truth. You know, I wonder sometimes what might have become of our movement if Ernest Holmes, our founder, had made this a condition of being a member. Imagine if this was presented as a rule. You must, at least once a day, let go of all that is not true. He's just describing our affirmative prayer practice. And lay hold of life. That's the first step of our prayer practice. Recognize it. Now imagine with me if you had, since your teen years, or since the very first time that you found this teaching, at least once a day, paused ceremonially and prepared yourself, washed your hands maybe, or prepared the environment where you were going to do this, and then with all sincerity conducted your spiritual mind treatment, your affirmative prayer practice. And imagine you did it because it was a requirement for membership. Or imagine if it was a requirement to do it 5 times a day, and that you had been doing it ever since you started, never missing once, except in the case of infirmity or illness. Imagine. Of course, we would never get away with it as a mandatory rule, not here. Because we're, the people who are attracted to Centers for Spiritual Living, we are nonconformists. We are individual thinkers, and nobody will ever be able to tell us what to think, let alone what to do or how to practice. No. We don't do that. I think it may be part of the reason why, as a movement, we've never really grown to take over the world. We just can't organize behind the idea. It's like we could never wage war. We could just never agree. But sometimes I think the reason is that, I must speak for myself, maybe I lack the discipline to stay on task with my practice. I'm challenged to keep on task with my practice. And it's curious because I asked myself, look, if prayer works as well as I say it does, as I've discovered it to work, why wouldn't I want to practice it 5 times a day? In Islam, there is such an obligatory religious duty to pray 5 times a day, by invoking the name of the one God, and to polish the heart and remove the rust. That's what it says in the Quran. Polish the heart and remove the rust. That's what caught the attention of the author of the book Wisdom Walk, because we're telling the story of this crisis as her marriage was crumbling, and she got to that part of the journey where the only thing left for her was to surrender, and she surrendered to the practice of praying. And it's such a beautiful part in the book. She talks about prayer as cool water nourishing her soul. It's just exquisite. And it's the setup for this idea of what it might be like for us if we surrendered to prayer more frequently. In Muslim society, it's built in a physical reminder. People are literally called by the imam 5 times a day to prayer. It's helpful. We don't have that, and I could see that might be a challenge for schedules, get into trouble at work, But imagine if we cultivated something like it, using our smart devices to remind us, hey, time to pray. So we're going to look at the traditional times that a Muslim is expected to pray, and I'm not suggesting that you adopt these times, because later I'll suggest an alternative for creating a schedule for yourself. So it starts early in the morning, 1 hour before dawn. When the everyday world is still asleep, the book reads, in such peace and quiet, we can easily hear our own breath. At this dawn time of prayer, it is easy to feel God's presence. I was remembering visiting the ashram in India that is our non-profit partner, and the day begins at 4 a.m. It took a little getting used to, But I'll tell you something. There is an atmosphere at 4 a.m. that makes it so you don't need to exert any energy to get into the mood for prayer. It's the mood of the morning pours itself into you. Oh, and to start the day off on the right foot like that. See, if I don't, then I am at the mercy of the other rising energies of the day that pour themselves into me. It's almost like a shield to begin that way. I loved the practice. And then the second prayer is at noon. It comes just after the sun has reached its zenith in the sky. The illumination of the sun fills the day, and it's a time of full power, creativity, and perhaps forgetfulness about that connection we may have with God. The reminder to turn within and pray at this time presents an opportunity to remember our passion for God. Now, I can see the wisdom of that, because sometimes by noon o'clock, I have forgotten a lot of what it means to be a kind, compassionate, peace-loving person. And sometimes, especially if I didn't start off on the right foot, I can appear to be anything but spiritual. I can see the value of reconnect. There's a long time between morning and noon. A lot of mischief can creep in. And then the afternoon prayer. It comes when the sun is halfway toward the horizon, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a time of winding down a bit, of being aware that objects cast shadows. There is a lessening of intensity in the emotional body. It's a good time to reconnect with the power and presence of God. In the afternoon for me, and I know people are different, but for me, I see my physical and emotional energy all winding down in the afternoon. And if I'm tired and I empty myself out too completely, that's when I'm inclined to act out of step with my values. That's when I'm inclined to snap or to cut corners or to lose my way. I can see how regeneration in the afternoon through prayer would help tremendously. And then the evening prayer. It comes at a time when the sun falls beneath the horizon. The daylight colors fade to a quieter vibration. Turning to prayer at this time grounds us in reality that is unchanging, even though the thoughts and feelings of the day may leave us restless. And I see another advantage for the evening prayer, especially if it comes at the completion of your work day, as a way of building a bridge so that I can now be present for my home life in a mindful way, instead of just bringing the activities of the day and then merging them into my home life. I can see how valuable that might be, because otherwise I will let any stress of those last hours linger with me, and there's nothing to smooth them out. And then my favorite, the night prayer. It comes about an hour after dark. The velvet sky displays the stars like jewels. The darkness is like death, like an ending. Turning to prayer brings us to the realization that God alone is real. And it helps me because I can ask the question of myself, when I close my eyes, what's in my mind? That's valuable to think about that. Let it be prayer. I've been re-practicing an old practice that I enjoy very much at night. It's a form of prayer. I'm reading the Science of Mind in 1 Year guide. You may have heard this, like some people will read the Bible in a year. You read a small portion every day until you've completed the whole Bible. We have something similar for our text, the Science of Mind. You read the Science of Mind in 1 year. You just read a short paragraph every evening. You could probably get guides from our bookstore. They're available. And what's wonderful about it is that's what I go to sleep with. Now, some people prefer to do that in the morning. Other way, it's something that can be incorporated into this. Now, that schedule may not work for you, but here is another way of looking at it for us here in the Center for Spiritual Living. We might, if we take on this experiment, link our prayer practice to something that we are most likely already doing every single day. Are there 5 anchors through the day? It's possible, not everybody's the same, but it is quite likely that at some point each day you wake up. And then that can be your first anchor, and before you do too much, let that be the time when you do your first affirmative prayer, your first spiritual mind treatment. It's possible that you have breakfast regularly. Then, after preparing breakfast, but before you eat it, let that be the anchor, the marker for you to do your second spiritual mind treatment, your affirmative prayer. And the same with lunchtime, and the same with dinner. And then the 5th one, at bedtime. I was reading online instructions for how to pray in the Muslim style, and it has some warnings against the common mistakes that a prayer might make. And don't you know, they apply to us also. They say one of the mistakes is don't make a chore out of your prayer practice. Don't make it into another one of those things I have to check off on my to-do list. And especially don't rush through it so I can get to the really important things. Instead, to take your time and to really feel each word in the prayer. To take your time to settle in before you begin so you can relax into your focus. To take your time and to make sure that the place where you're going to do your spiritual mind treatment is clean and neat. To take your time and make sure you're clean and neat. And to remain focused on what it is that you're doing while you're doing it. That's beautiful advice. And what prayers might you say? Well, if you haven't yet learned to spontaneously do affirmative prayer on your own for yourself, you can visit our online affirmative prayer library by going to our website, www.cslsr.org, and you'll see there is a tab there that says Support, which if you click will drop down a menu on which you will find Affirmative Prayer Library, which if you click will take you to our affirmative prayer library online. Now the nice thing about it, you'll see in the red circle, is you can search by topic. You can put business, neighborhood, family, happiness, and it will bring up all the prayers in the library that closely match your search request. Not only that, you can put your email address in the little box just below the search field, and you will be updated in your email every time a new prayer is added to the library. Now, you can use it in the following way. Search for and select 5 spiritual mind treatments that resonate with you, print them out, and then take them with you in your day. Prepare yourself for the next day, and then you can use that to read until it becomes familiar to you and you start to feel the language of affirmative prayer well enough that you can do it for yourself spontaneously. So I did search and print out one of the prayers for peace in the neighborhood, for us to begin the practice to get a sense of what's on there and how the words feel. So I offer this to you as our practice today, with the hope that maybe it will launch you into a deeper surrender, your own prayer practice. I invite you to breathe in, letting your eyes close, and imagining that as I read these words, that you silently are saying them in your own mind. There is one loving Spirit, one guiding presence, one perfect life. This one loving Spirit is the great protector and the great provider. Peace is its nature. Life is continuously remaking itself out of this peace. All neighborhoods everywhere are part of this one perfect life. The peace of the living Spirit is at the heart of all beings and at the core of every neighborhood. I accept for my neighborhood and for all neighborhoods everywhere that the peace of the living, loving Spirit is what prevails. All the resources that are required and needed to create a safe and respectful environment are available. Each person finds their unique way to contribute to the peace and to respect it. I accept loving, kind actions on the part of all who live in the community. I accept this good as the natural order of things. I accept that we are safe in our homes. I accept safety in our communities. I accept safety for our bodies, our property, our children, our animals, and our environment. And by means of this prayer, I am renewing my trust in my neighbors and in all those who pass through my neighborhood. And I am giving thanks for this word of prayer. And I trust it to manifest fully in my life. And after I read the prayer, I like to sit just for a moment of quiet to let it settle in.